The bank chiefs in turn have asked the real estate developers to lower unit prices of residential as well as commercial properties. We will keep you updates. We will keep you as and when as and when we have more developments on the issue. Joining us on the phone right now is Rohit Gera, who's the executive director of Pune-based Gera Developments, and with me in the studio is my colleague Anil. Rohit, thanks a lot for joining us. If you can hear me.
Go ahead, I can hear you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining us. Quoting from your from the article that you authored that appeared in one of the major dailies, do you think real estate sector receives a stepmotherly treatment in India as opposed to how the sector is treated in mature economies?
Yeah, I certainly think that we need to look at real estate as an integral part of the economy. Looking at the linkages on a backward basis to the industries that we're connected with, the financial sector, our end consumers who are home buyers, given the connectivity within the industry, within the country and within the economy, I think certainly real estate is receiving a stepdaughterly, stepmotherly, call it what you want, a treatment of that sort, which I don't think is correct.
Mr. Gera, this is Anil Nair on this end.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the thing is, the CREDAI has also been trying a lot to meet with this problem that is faced with that real estate sector is faced with. What is, as a developer, what is your opinion on the liquidity crunch that the sector is faced with?
Okay, let me first start off by putting a disclaimer forth. I am speaking on behalf of CREDAI. I'm speaking purely as an independent developer. I think that to answer your question, there is clearly a liquidity crisis as far as the entire country is concerned. And what I am personally feel that we should be concerned about is the fact that every statement which you hear from the powers that be, whether it's the Reserve Bank or whether it's the Finance Ministry and so on, go ahead and say, oh, liquidity is being increased, and then there's a footnote which says, but not for realty. ECB is being permitted, footnote says, but not for realty. I think this is a fundamental problem. And until and unless we address the issue of the liquidity crisis plus the other concerns that the industry faces, we're not going to solve the problem by merely stating that developers should cut prices or purely by pumping in liquidity or purely by cutting down interest rates. I think it's a solution that needs to be put together by all people who are connected with the industry, and unless we look at it like that, we will not find a solution.
Mr. Gera, in the article that you wrote in the Times of India, you also mentioned about how if the prices of real estate go down, it would actually affect the repayments by home buyers. There will be much more default in payment. Can you just explain what that scenario would be?
Look, it's a pretty simple concept. Thus far, the banks have been asking the, home buyers to put in 15% of their own equity into purchasing a home. And if we talk about a price cut which exceeds the 15%, you're going to have customers sitting negative equity. Now, why would a customer want to continue to pay an EMI for a property which is now much less than what he has to pay out? He's just going to walk away. There is a risk of him walking away from the transaction. This is going to end up leaving the mortgage companies holding real estate paper, which is under construction projects. Without very much funding, they're not going to come forward and pay the next installment to the developer, and this will deepen the crisis. So I don't believe that purely a rate cut across that all developers should cut prices 20-25% is the solution. I believe that it's actually a recipe for disaster.
You know, just before this discussion, we were chatting about this problem that real estate faces, along with my colleague Divya here, about how real estate is treated in India and US.
Right. So, Rohit, do you think there's a lack of congregated effort in India, lack of effort from the entire ecosystem to address the real issues that are affecting the sector? In US, probably you'd have the central bank and the US, sit across the table and
deal with the situation. Congress
make an
as well
effort
as the central bank would all sit together and
I
solve
think
it?
let's look at it this way. The crisis that we're currently facing is unprecedented across the world. In a situation of this sort, and you can go back tomorrow and turn around and say that, look, let's get into the finger pointing tomorrow. But today we have a crisis on our hands. And I think that that's what the US government, the Congress, the Senate, the Republicans, the Democrats, Main Street and Wall Street got together and resolved the problem. They didn't get into a finger pointing. There will be a time for introspection, but I think that time for introspection is not now. This is the time for all players to get together and find a consolidated solution which impacts the entire industry. And it's not just real estate, should not be viewed purely as the people who are building the buildings. The real estate industry impacts the consumers, it impacts the financial institutions, and all players, it impacts the manufacturers, and we have to take all these factors into account and find a solution for all people together. Currently in India, we're not approaching it in this manner.
Mr.
That's
Gera,
unfortunate. That needs to change.
Mr. Gera, point taken. The what I would like to add is that it also affects employment to a large extent, because after all, real estate sector is the second largest employer in the country. That would at least make the government see the light of day in making policy changes.
You're absolutely right. It impacts it impacts employment in a huge way. Let's take the next step forward of this as well. If developers don't have liquidity to build those homes, the customers who they're building it for, their homes get delayed. They're continuing to pay an EMI. They're continuing to pay a pre-EMI to the bank. At the same time, they're also paying rent for their existing home. So again, the end consumer, who also tomorrow goes out and votes for the same government, is being affected as well. So it affects the entire economy in so many different ways. And employment is also a very prime aspect of it.
Mr. Gera, today is a day of meetings. Even the Prime Minister has called up a meeting to get a policy change in all sectors, not just real estate, across the industry. Now, if that is happening, what kind of changes as a developer would you expect in policy?
Look, I think the first and foremost is a fundamental shift where we stop viewing real estate as something which is extraneous and something which is separate from the rest of the country. So I think that's a fundamental mindset shift. In terms of specific policy, I think that the first thing that we need to do is the Reserve Bank stepped in about 2 years ago to tighten the liquidity and to slow down an overheated real estate sector. I think it's time that people realize that the real estate sector today is facing difficulty, and we must roll back those tightening provisions, and in fact now is the time to loosen them a little bit further. Remove real estate from the negative list, get funding back out for real estate. We have to bring confidence back to the real estate buyer. So I think that's something which needs to certainly be done. The single biggest thing that will move towards that is a reduction in interest rates for home loan takers. Maybe the solution is to give them, the 1.5 lakh rupee deductible from the interest from their home loans. Given what home loan rates have gone up to, given what home prices are at, maybe it's time to take that up to 2.5 and 3. But it's time to instill confidence amongst home buyers. It's time to bring liquidity to the developers. It requires a whole bunch of solutions which apply to all players in the industry.
Mr. Gera, before we take a break, as you have listed all these issues, why do you think that there is a feeling that real estate is not just like any other industry? Why does it happen that real estate sector gets a stepmotherly treatment from government as well as policymakers?
I think that there is a view, which I don't subscribe to obviously, that it's extremely easy for real estate developers to come in and make easy money. I think real estate developers are wrongly viewed as purely being opportunistic. Clearly, entrepreneurship is required to be a real estate developer. And I think it's for these reasons. And I think the other very large difference as to why real estate is viewed substantially differently is that there are two kinds of people who buy the real estate product. One is people who are looking at buying real estate as a home. And the other is the person as the investor who looks at real estate as a financial instrument. And when all other financial instruments are tanking in values, then they view real estate as you need to bring prices down, you need to bring prices down. But as far as the home buyer is concerned, it's something which is completely different for him. And I think that it's this dichotomy which also adds to the, how we treat real estate as a sector from time to time. It depends which way you're viewing it. The other last point which I'd like to make on this is that, unfortunately, I think that real estate is viewed as 3 or 4 major pockets of the country, 10 or 15 listed developers, and they are treated as the entire real estate industry. This is not so. So we need to look at real estate as something which is across the country, in the tier 3 towns as well, and developers who are not just the large listed developers, but the smallest developer who's building one building of 6 apartments for 6 different customers.
Okay, Mr. Gera, just to add to my last question, today's policy meet, which the Prime Minister has called, that meet is also discussing issues like how to fund SMEs. Now, SMEs, as you rightly put it, entrepreneurs form a large part of real estate sector. It's not just with the small developers. An entire array of accessory industry is being led by entrepreneurs. Now, do you think if the SME sector is given some kind of respite by way of policy changes, do you think that would actually make things better or make life easier for the real estate sector, or at least the large chunk of real estate sector?
No, I think it's a chicken and an egg situation. If you're going to give them the benefit, what will they do with the benefit if you're not going to be in if the parent industry, so to speak, if their customers are the real estate developers? If the real estate developers don't have the solutions put into place, then it's no point having something downstream as giving somebody downstream a solution. How far is that solution going to go? I mean, this is a classic case of dealing with the symptom and not the fundamental problem at the root of the problem. We need to address the solution for the real estate industry, and the ancillaries to the real estate industry are a part of the industry. We have to solve the problem for the entire industry, the developers included.
Mr. Gera, we liked your turns of phrase. Divya.
Right, Mr. Gera will take a quick break on this note. Perhaps he's resounding the views of the entire sector, that the sector needs more attention and some immediate policy changes. On that note, we will take a quick break and come back with more. Stay tuned.